Dear learners, welcome back to our MOOC on rural development. Today, we'll continue with the second module of this week and focus on the sixth unit, which is on planning and rural development in India. So by now, you should be familiar with the concept of rural development and its evolution in India, which we discussed in the previous videos. And in this unit, we will move on to explore the planning process in rural development, its historical trajectory, and the major initiatives undertaken by the Government of India. We'll also understand how planning has shaped rural development policies over the years, including the role of 5-year plans, decentralized planning, and institutions like Panchayati Raj. So, let us begin our discussion on how planning serves as the backbone of rural development in India and how various strategies, policies, and programs have been designed to improve the socio-economic conditions in rural areas. So, we all know that planning and rural development in India has been deeply connected since independence. And to understand this connection, it is important to see why organized and systematic planning was viewed as essential for bringing about rural transformation in the newly formed state. Government intervention in rural development became imperative as India at the time of independence was largely an agrarian economy with nearly 85% of its population residing in rural areas and dependent on agriculture and allied sectors for their livelihood. During the first half of the 28th century, agricultural growth was extremely slow, averaging only about 0.3% per annum. And at the same time, illiteracy rates were also alarmingly high at 84%, and public health services were grossly inadequate to combat widespread epidemics such as malaria, cholera, and smallpox. Although agriculture constituted the economic background of the population, the colonial administration had shown little initiative in improving the agricultural practices, focusing instead on the cultivation of export-oriented crops like cotton, jute, and tea. Moreover, market forces alone were insufficient to uplift the rural communities, giving the deep-rooted structural rigidities and the institutional constraints. And it was prevalent in all the regions, the rural regions. And as a result, what happened? Large section of the rural population risked being excluded from the advantages of the market-driven growth, underscoring the need for deliberate state planning and intervention in rural development. So in this context, I also just want to briefly touch upon the term rural development and what it actually entails. So simply put, as you have by now also learned about it in detail, rural development is about using, protecting, and improving the natural, physical, and human resources available in rural areas to bring long-term improvements in people's lives. It also means creating more job and income opportunities for the rural communities, while at the same time taking care to preserve the environment and ensure sustainable growth. So now, having understood the meaning and scope of rural development, we can now move on to explore the various strategies and plans that have been formulated to address the challenges of rural development and promote sustainable progress. So coming to the approaches and planning of rural development in India. Soon after 1947, the newly independent Indian state faced the twin challenges of underdevelopment and profound rural agrarian poverty and decided to adopt a planned development model via the Planning Commission, which was established in 1950 to assess the country's material, capital, and human resources, and also at the same time to formulate a plan for the most effective and balanced utilization. Some of the objectives outlined in these plans were maximization of national income, modernized agricultural practices, rapid industrialization, providing full employment, and most importantly, achieving self-sufficiency. The central purpose identified with the process of development was to raise the standard of living and opening out more opportunities to people. And since independence, India's economic framework has been founded on the principle of planned development implemented through the successive 5-year plans. These plans were conceived, executed, and monitored by the Planning Commission and subsequently by the Niti Aayog. The 12th 5-year plan marked the final plan under this framework, concluding in March 2017. So, in order to address the issues of rural development, the broad approaches or plans combined two overlapping impulses. One was to narrow the rural urban and inter-regional disparities through rural industrialization, dispersal of industry, infrastructure outreach, employment generation, and so on. And B was to modernize agriculture through productivity, markets, credits, and integrate it into the broader economy. So over time, this planning commission, from 1950s, then to 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, the emphasis of the plans shifted. Early on, more heavy industry plus agriculture was the main focus. Later, it moved on to rural industrialization, and then in 1980s, large rural employment infrastructural programs, and after liberalization, that is post 1991, greater emphasis was given on decentralization, local governance, and market liberalization, which will be discussed in detail while we go ahead with the unit. And from the outset, India adopted a planning framework shaped by the socialist influenced ideas. The state would mobilize resources, allocate priorities, and seek to achieve both growth and equity. Rural development was not treated simply as an add-on to agriculture, but also as a part of the integrated strategy. So rural infrastructure, rural industry, credit, markets, social service, and so on was also given importance. And the planning basically moved along two major orientations. One was regional development, which is to reduce inequalities between states, regions, rural versus urban areas, and the backward versus advanced areas, which was implemented mostly in the 1960s and 70s. And the second was balanced development, to avoid over-concentration of industry, urbanization, and spread of development to rural areas, small towns, peripheral regions. These orientations influenced features such as industry dispersal, prioritizing rural infrastructure, and sectoral interventions in agriculture, small industry, and services, rather than only, putting their emphasis on heavy urban metal-based industry. Agriculture and related issues, if I talk about the Planning Commission, it received the highest priority in the earlier plans, during 1950 to 55. And it was primarily aimed at enhancing agricultural production and strengthening the key economic infrastructures, such as irrigation, power, and transport in post-independence period. And at the same time, it was confronted that in that time our country was confronted with acute food shortage, and so the plan emphasized on increasing food grain production to address this crisis. Significant policy measures such as abolition of the Jamindari system and introduction of the community development program and the Grow More Food campaign were implemented. Additionally, related sectors including marketing, fisheries, animal husbandry, soil conservation, and forestry also received focused attention. And as a result, what happened? The food grain production rose from 54 million tons in 1950 to 51 to 65.8 million tons. And the overall output of the agricultural commodities increased by 22.2% to 32% by the end of the plan period. And a substantial portion of the total outlay was allocated to agriculture and irrigation, with most of the targets either achieved or surpassed. The Community Development Program, also known as the CDP, it was launched in October 1952, and the plan emphasized the integrated development of agriculture, irrigation, as I've already mentioned, and small-scale enterprises, transport, and also employment. Major irrigation projects such as the Mettur Dam, Hirakud Dam, and Bhakra Nangal Dam were undertaken during this period. The CDP was conceived as an instrument to transform the social and economic life of the village community as a whole, cutting across the religious economic differences. It was, however, soon realized that covering the entire country under CDP was not possible due to many reasons like a shortage of funds and also personnel. And the facilities created under the program primarily benefited richer farmers and failed to bring significant improvements in the living standards of the marginal farmers and agricultural laborers. The objectives of self-reliance and people's participation could thus not be realized due to the inadequate focus on developing responsive leadership. Moreover, the program was unsuccessful in transforming people's ideas, attitudes, and outlook, with a large section of the population lacking awareness of social education. Efforts to promote rural industries and cooperatives did not gain momentum. And additionally, administrative weakness, bureaucratic delays, coordination issues, interdepartmental rivalries, and the absence of clear functional responsibilities at various levels further, hampered the program's effectiveness. But nonetheless, despite the shortcomings, the Community Development Program played a crucial role in establishing the groundwork for rural economic development and shaping strategies and also the approaches for rural development. It acknowledged the importance of investing in both human and material resources as a means to bring about social transformation in rural areas. Then, India's engagement with plan development gained momentum in the second five-year plan, that is from 1955 to 60, which placed strong emphasis on industrialization. The strategy aimed to reduce pressure on the agricultural sector by expanding employment opportunities in heavy industries and the capital goods sector. By promoting forward and backward linkages within the industry, the plan sought to create a robust industrial base. And this approach led to significant growth in the capital goods sector and laid the foundation for a self-reliant industrial economy in India. Although widely recognized as an industrial plan, the second plan also contributed some insights into the agricultural reform. So the plan documented and featured a comprehensive chapter on land reform and agrarian reconstruction, promoting cooperative farming and advocating for institutional changes in rural India. It also envisioned an extensive infrastructure of community development programs, national extension services, and publicly funded irrigation networks, reflecting a holistic approach to rural development alongside the industrial growth, which was the priority. Then again, in the third five-year plan, agriculture was accorded top priority, making a shift from this industrial focus of the second plan. And this plan sought to correct the earlier de-emphasis on agriculture. However, Indian planning in the 1960s was severely disrupted by two major external shocks. One was the 1962 war with China, which led to increased defense expenditure and reduced public investment. And the consecutive agricultural failures is a second from 1965 and 1967, which exposed India's vulnerability in the food security. The reliance on wheat imports from the USA highlighted India's dependence on external aid and underscored the urgency of achieving food sufficiency. In response, the government abandoned the five-year plans temporarily, resulting in the plan holiday period, that is from 1966 to 69, during which the annual plans were implemented. And these annual plans introduced a clear agricultural development strategy that shifted focus from structural and social constraints such as conservative agrarian relations and inefficient practices to technological modernization. This approach, described as a betting on the strong, laid the foundation for Green Revolution, which was implemented during the fourth plan. This plan aimed to reverse the earlier trend of increasing concentration on wealth and economic power and sought to promote a more equitable distribution of resources. It was formulated on the basis of the Gatt-Gill formula, which emphasized growth with stability and a steady movement towards self-reliance. During this period, when Indira Gandhi served as the Prime Minister of India, a major policy initiative taken by the government to nationalize 14 major commercial banks, including Allahabad Bank, Bank of Baroda, Bank of India, and many other banks, was taken during this period by the PM. And this move was intended to bring the banking sector under greater public control to support developmental goals, especially in the rural areas. Additionally, the agricultural sector witnessed significant progress due to the advancement of the Green Revolution, which improved food grain production and strengthened the food security. But there were also backdrops like the geopolitical situation in Indian subcontinent. It posed challenges to economic planning. The Indo-Pakistan War of 1971 and the Bangladesh Liberation War diverted substantial financial resources towards defense and humanitarian support. So this, in a way, affected the funds initially allocated for industrial development. In response to the recurring food shortages and to stabilize the prices, the concept of a buffer stock was introduced with a planned reserve of 5 million tons of food grains. Additionally, during this period, specific regional development programs were also initiated. Notably, the Drought-Prone Area Program, DPAP, was launched to address the persistent challenges of drought-affected regions and to promote sustainable agricultural practices in those areas. Here, it is to be noted that while the Green Revolution improved agricultural productivity, concerns of distributive justice, it persisted. And this led to a growing emphasis on poverty alleviation, symbolized by the political slogan Garibi Hatao, that is, remove poverty. And for the first time, poverty eradication was recognized as a central objective of planning, and it shaped subsequent policy discourse and public debate, which was taken up in the fifth year of planning. So it also prioritized achieving self-reliance in both agricultural production and national defense. And during this fifth plan period, an important legislative development took place with the amendment of the Electricity Supply Act in 1975, empowering the central government to directly participate in the power generation and transmission, thereby strengthening the country's energy infrastructure. There was another notable development during this plan, which was the introduction of Indian National Highway System, accompanied by the widening and improvement of major road networks to meet the growing demands of traffic and connectivity. This period also witnessed an expansion in the tourism sector, supported by improved transportation and infrastructure. And additionally, the 20-point program was also launched in 1975, and it aimed at eradicating poverty, improving public services, and promoting social welfare. And this continued until 1979. In the realm of social development, if we talk about, the Minimum Needs Program, MNP, was introduced in the first year of fifth five-year plan. And conceptualized and launched by D.P. Dhar, the program sought to ensure the provision of basic necessities such as education, health, nutrition, rural water supply, housing, and rural roads, with the broader objective of enhancing the standard of living of the underprivileged section in the society. In the next video, we will get in detail about the programs. So for now, I'm just giving you the gist of it. And then I'll talk about the sixth five-year plans. It started from 1980s to 85. And this again made the eradication of poverty its principal objective. To support rural development, the plan created stronger institutional finance. The NABARD was established in 1982, consolidating credit function from RBI and the Agricultural Finance and Development Corporation. It also strengthened market infrastructure by promoting regulated markets and cooperative marketing to support rural producers. And to directly address the poverty, the plan placed strong emphasis on targeted programs such as National Rural Employment Program, the Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program, launched in August 1983, training of rural youth for self-employment. These were some of the programs, and development of women and children in rural areas, and the integrated rural development programs. These were some of the programs which were taken for rural development. And alongside these, the plan also reinforced the minimum needs program and various area development initiatives. So taken together, these measures reflect a robust commitment to rural development, employment generation, and poverty alleviation. And this, poverty alleviation, it continued to remain a central concern during the seventh plan as well. This plan aimed to promote the economic growth, enhance food grain production, and generate employment through the principle of social justice. Its major thrust areas included agricultural development again, then adoption of modern technology, anti-poverty programs, and ensuring basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. It also emphasized improving productivity among the small and large farmers while moving towards economic self-reliance. During this period, the focus increasingly shifted towards again the industrial modernization, leading to a relative decline in the emphasis of the public sector as the main driver of growth. The plan encouraged diversification of industry, adoption of new technologies, development of broad-based entrepreneurship, and the emergence of new sectors such as petrochemicals. But despite these positive developments, several challenges also emerged during this plan. Liberalization led import surges and adversely impacted the balance of payments. Severe fiscal strain led to inflationary pressures even amidst record agricultural output. Additionally, the organized sector's capacity to generate employment from investment showed a noticeable decline. These mounting economic pressures and structural weaknesses eventually culminated in a full-blown macroeconomic crisis in the early 1990s. The 8 5-year plan was delayed, due to this economic and political instability, and the years 1990 to 91 and 91 to 92 were treated as annual plans. Here, India experienced a severe balance of payments crisis in 1991, with foreign exchange reserve failing to approximately US $1 billion. This crisis prompted the government led by Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao and Finance Minister to initiate major structural reforms, marking the beginning of economic liberalization, privatization, and globalization, which we all know as LPG in India. The 8th plan focused on modernizing industries and gradually opening the economy to address deficits and foreign debt. It emphasized poverty reduction measures, employment generation, infrastructure strengthening, human resource development, and population control. The plan also promoted decentralization, encouraging greater participation of Panchayati Raj institutions, urban local bodies, NGOs, and communities in development process. India also became a member of the World Trade Organization in 1995 during the course of this plan. And from the 9th 5-year plan onwards, India's planning paradigm shifted more strongly towards the social justice, participatory governance, and decentralization. The 9th plan formally emphasized democratic participation in development, proposing that the Panchayati Raj institutions to be empowered to prepare plans for economic and social development with corresponding allocation of administrative resources. And as a part of this shift, non-governmental organizations began to play a more active role. So in the 9th plan, the role of NGOs could be seen. And it envisaged NGOs working in public, private, civil society partnership, particularly in the rural development, and supporting self-help groups, cooperative organizations, and other grassroots institutions. NGOs bring flexibility, local knowledge, and community trust, acting as mediators between state institutions and marginalized populations. At the same time, India's planning moved towards a rights based and inclusive development model. For instance, the ninth plan recognized education as a fundamental right and committed to operationalizing programs via panchayats and urban local bodies. The 11th Plan 2007 to 12 further embedded inclusion, emphasizing targeted interventions for scheduled castes, tribes, minorities, and women, and sought to monitor social equity more rigorously. So, decentralized planning gained institutional strength through constitutional reform and policy initiatives. The 73rd and 74th Amendments had already constitutionally empowered Panchayati Raj bodies, but from the 9th Plan onwards, there was a great devolution of power, resources, and responsibilities to local governments. Studies of well-functioning Gram Panchayat shows that meaningful participation of marginalized communities improves when local bodies have real planning authority. And over this period, NGO funding, both national and external, became more integrated into developmental strategies. NGOs function as planning partners, implementers, and also watchdogs, shaping a more pluralist development ecosystem. In 2015, a major institutional change occurred. The Planning Commission was abolished and replaced by Niti Aayog. And in the post-Planning Commission era, Niti Aayog represents a shift towards a more flexible, consultative, and knowledge-driven planning framework. Its role as a policy think tank emphasizes on cooperative federalism, data-based decision-making, and alignment with global development agendas such as Sustainable Development Goals, reflecting the changing needs of India's evolving economy. It embodies the idea that development planning today requires coordination, innovation, and partnership rather than rigid target setting. However, it also has to be noted that Niti Aayog also faces certain structural limitations. Unlike the Planning Commission, it does not have financial allocation powers, which weakens its ability to influence implementation directly. While it encourages state participation, its engagement with grassroots institutions, civil society, and local needs remain limited. Critics argue that without stronger links to local governance and welfare-oriented planning, it risks becoming predominantly technocratic and advisory in nature. Nevertheless, the emergence of Niti Aayog marks the transformation of planning from a centralized resource distribution machinery to a decentralized and strategic institution. Ultimately, the future of planning and development in India lies in striking a balance between expertise and participation, growth and equality, and innovation and inclusion, ensuring that the development remains both sustainable and people-centered. So, dear learners, we have come to an end of today's discussion. I hope this session helped you understand the significance of planning in rural development in India. And in the next video, we will explore the various rural development programs in detail and see how these programs have been implemented to improve the socio-economic conditions of rural communities. Thank you again for watching.